Finally, to wrap up this course, let's go ahead and make an effects sweep using the meld synthesizer. It's going to sound like this. This kind of patch is actually super easy to set up on the synthesizer because of some of the really interesting waveforms. And this could be really great because now you can make custom one-shot effect samples for your tracks. You could then bounce everything out for this one shot, bring it into your productions whenever you needed a custom effect stab, and add something really interesting to your tracks. So let's go ahead and take a look at that note. So far, it's just super simple. I just have this playing a note of E. You could change that to whatever you would like, depending on the pitch of the effect stab you're going for, but I just chose that as my main note. Let's click on that and go ahead and drag over our MIDI just so we have it. And I'm going to change the color just to keep everything organized. Make that like blue as well. And then let's go ahead and go over to our synths and drag in the meld synthesizer. So let's click on this, drag it in, and then we can go ahead and start working on our patch. So the first thing that we need to do is go ahead and go over to our wave. I'll turn off that second one because we'll revisit that here in a moment. And let's go ahead and add in that first kind of pitched element that almost sounds like a percussion or kick drum part. Let's go ahead and swap this over to the tarp waveform. Sounds like this. What this does is really gives you almost like a kick drum once you increase this decay. So starting at a higher pitch and then pitching down to a lower sound. We'll drop that down 2 octaves so that way it's a little bit richer sounding. Kind of gives us a... And that just gives us a tone to work with for my main effect stab. We'll leave this control here at its default, but you could play around with this for various different types of effect sounds. So once you have everything set up, feel free to play around with the tones of these oscillators because you actually can change out your effect sweep pretty easily just by playing around with those controls. And then we'll go ahead and keep the filter at its default state, but we'll leave it on just so there's a little bit of filtering, just to kind of add a little bit of character to the synth, but it won't add too much to the sound, but we'll just leave it as is. And then let's go ahead and hop over to our envelopes. So we'll go to the sustain, we will drop that down to an amount of 0, then put our decay nice and long so that way it eventually fades out, even though we have this decay already set up on the pitch. Now we have one happening on the volume. So as I press and hold the note, it's slowly fading out until we don't hear anything at the end. So depending on how long you want that pitched element to be, you can adjust this decay value. So you can make a longer effect sweep or something shorter. But for us, an amount of like 4.47 or maybe even a little bit longer. We'll do 4.97 here. But feel free to adjust that depending on how long you want your effects to be. Now we can move over to the next waveform, which is where all the texture and movement of our main sound is going to come from. That's going to be from this really interesting wave called the extra tone wave. Listen to what it sounds like. So by itself, not super interesting, but as we increase the pitch, we get this pitched element, and then this envelope control is where this is really going to come to life. Now what we're going to be doing is automating some of the controls on this to give us a really interesting movement for the patch. So we'll put the pitch at 69, and then we're going to go ahead and put the envelope amount to 88.1. And once you play these notes much lower, you'll actually hear that main kind of texture that we're playing with. It almost gives you this weird like lasery sound. And then as you play higher up notes, you'll get some adjustments for the rate of that modulation. Then we'll go ahead and leave that filter as is, but feel free to adjust that once you have everything set up on your synth. And then let's go ahead and add in some movement here. So the main movement that we want to create is a pitch movement for my wave. So that way it starts up at the higher tone and then moves down to a lower tone. So it gives you that effect sweep sound. So let's go ahead and hop into the matrix. We will go over to the pitch modulation section, which is right here. And we're going to go over to the mod envelope, so the secondary envelope here, and we'll put that at -48. So you can hear now we're starting to get some movement. But what we want to do here is go ahead and make a fade in. So that way it's pitching down because we're going at a negative value, so it's going to be inverted. So basically what we're going to do is just increase the attack. Now listen to what this does. As I increase this value, we get our movement. Now, depending on how long or short you want that effect stab to be, this is where you'll go through and adjust this. So for us, I want this to be at 5.52 seconds. So we go 5.52. So let's go ahead and drag it over until we get to 5.52. Sounds like this. And that's where the main element of my sound is coming from. Then we can layer in that pitched element on top. Almost gives you like this sub drop underneath. Or if you play it up higher, gives you like a weird, kind of more spacey effect sound. Then we can add in some drive to thicken it up. Kind of just add some crunch to it, giving us a little bit more of an analog sound. Probably also turn that down just a little bit too. And then let's go ahead and add in a little bit of compression to kind of help push this together, so that way it's a little bit more balanced, because there is quite a bit going on, especially with all the movement from this wave and also all the movement from the sub as well. And then we're going to add in some delay, which is where this sound is really going to come to life. So let's go ahead and add in a glue compressor. Let's go to our effects here. Let's go down to the glue, and we'll drag and drop that in. And we're looking here more for like dynamic control, nothing that's adding like a snap or any kind of long release or something. So we can just leave these at their default state. We're looking for just dynamic. We're just looking for that dynamic attenuation. So we'll drop the threshold down. So we get a couple of dBs of gain reduction. And with this type of tone, you can actually over compress this quite a bit, because we're not trying to have some sort of like kick drum sound that has a lot of snap to it. We can kind of go ahead and compress this so it's very balanced sounding, especially because we'll be feeding this into a really big delay here in a moment. Let's put that makeup gain up to like 5 dB. Then we can put the threshold down to negative 23.2. Okay, and then the last two things we'll do is add in a delay, and we'll just use the regular delay inside of Ableton, but you could use any delay plugin you'd like. The main thing here that we'll be adding is going to be a ping pong delay, so we can add in some stereo width into our sound. And then I'm going to add in a utility effect just to automate this down a little bit more, so it gives me more control over the overall shape of my effect sounds. We'll turn that off, and we'll revisit that here in a moment. So put this on a delay amount of 2, so that's the delay time of 2. And then we want to reduce the feedback down. Again, this depends on how long your sound is. So if you want more feedback, you can increase this, or if you want less, you could decrease it. And then right now, you'll notice that a lot of those high frequencies are kind of getting in the way of the main sound. So the delay sound is actually kind of washing out some of the clarity in my sound. So I'm going to go to the filter section, and I'm going to go ahead and reduce this. And then we'll drag this over to the left-hand side. So that way now those high frequencies are being filtered out. And that already sounds a lot better. So we're getting the mid-range from the delay, but the high frequencies and texture are sitting on top of everything, and those aren't fighting with the main elements inside my delay sound. Play around with that just a little bit more, maybe frequency of 331 Hertz. Then the width is at 5.09. Next thing that we'll do is go ahead and turn on the ping pong modes. That way it's going to bounce from left to right. And that's really where this is going to come alive. But we don't want that much delay, so we'll put that down to about like 20. We can maybe push this up just a little bit more, kind of play around with that value. It always takes a little bit of trial and error. There we go. So that sounds nice. That's 378. And then let's go over to our utility, and then I'm going to automate my gain. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, and then I will right click or 2-finger click and hit show automation. And then we're just going to create a very simple gain automation here just to pull this down. That way, once it finishes playback, we have no more volume. So it kind of gives me the ability to go through and actually adjust the curve of my effect sweep here. So I can just play around with the shape of that just to kind of tighten up my sound. Or I could have it be a little bit more linear. And that just gives me some more detailed control over the overall curve. Now, last thing that we could do is play around with the different pitched elements inside my tone here. So I could maybe go through and increase the sort of 808 below everything. Kind of blow that out a little bit more if I wanted, or I can increase the texture on top. Just depends on what we're going for. I think I almost want like a little bit less of this texture, so maybe turn that down just a little bit. So negative 3.7 dB, so just slightly under what the default is. I think that kind of sounds a little bit nicer. Okay, so altogether, our final effect sweep sounds like this. From here, feel free to play around with the different controls on this meld synthesizer, because you can change out the general tone of these waves to really kind of customize this, or you can adjust the length of the envelope or the various different controls to extend or shorten the sound depending on what you need for your track. So especially playing around with this tone control. You can get a lot of variation on the sounds just by adjusting some of the oscillators. That wraps up this video on how to make a custom effect sweep using the Meld synthesizer, and then also wraps up the sound design course with Ableton Live 12 and Groove 3. I hope you enjoyed this series of videos, and if you did, make sure to check out the other courses on Groove 3's website for more music production, mixing, and mastering tutorials. Thanks again. I'll see you in another course soon.